So business of natural language computing is what we're going to be talking about tonight. I can't go on forever, so do pull the cane around my neck if it feels like I'm running out of time.
After 15 minutes.
15? Wow, brilliant. Okay, that's fine. There we go. So I'm going to move quickly, but also, so this is me. My name's Julian Harris. Unfortunately, my son and wife can't make it tonight, so we just have to do with just me. I'm head of technology research at CognitionX, focusing on, at this stage, of chatbots and natural language processing. CognitionX was its vision is to accelerate the adoption of AI responsibly. Those of you who went into the CogX conference in June, that's the kind of thing we do to bring the community together and give lots of people access to AI in different forms. So today I'm just going to talk very briefly about what I do, which is research. And so why research? Well, there's actually three main reasons why people do technology research, really, actually. One is the offensive. You want to take advantage of emerging tech to give yourself a lead over your competitors. The other is the opposite, which is defensive. So the people who've taken advantage, you're now chasing them. So defensive is the second part. And the third most common is when you're doing consulting and you want to build a strategic partnership with your customer, then it's really, really helpful, I found, when I've done this work, to create a thought leadership piece. And often in pre-sales, you might want to sort of paint a vision of what the future might be like. And so research can help with that and understanding of trends in the marketplace and the landscape. So how do you research? Well, there's three parts to that. First is staying informed. Second is experiment. And third is integrating those experiments into your normal workflow. So how do you stay informed? Well, you need to know the landscape, and then you keep up to date. So knowing the landscape, my session, very briefly, is going to be about that. You're going to get a little bit of a hint of the kind of work we do. And the keep up to date is the subscription that we offer, which allows you to get monthly up-to-date updates on what's happening in more detail. And when you get a primer, excuse me, and you can get the primer here, this link here, you can download that for another day. You'll have that complimentary, but then we're going to put a paywall on that. Case studies and insight reports and event discounts. Okay, so that's the overview of what we do as a business and what I'm leading. I'm going to have a series of pithy messages that I want you to take away. And in fact, the reality is that most of you will forget most of what I'm saying, so think about the pithy messages. And the first one is that chatbots are affecting every point where digital business is communicating with people. That is a key business message. That is one of the key things I want to leave you all with. Pithy message number one. So the second is the question around chatbots. Now, what is the term and what are we using? Because it's actually referring to lots of different things. We like to use the term instant messaging with computers. We like it because it really is through the channel of instant messaging that chatbots engage. And why is it a big deal? Well, here's an audience question for you all. Quick poll. Hands up. Who thinks there are more than 1 million instant messages sent a day around the world? All right, keep them up if you think there's more than 1 billion messages sent a day. Okay, any more? Well, you're all right actually, it's 100 billion plus. It's insane. So pithy message number two, instant messaging is huge and it's not going away, and it's been done by most people in the world. Okay. Chatbots, there's a lot of them, most of them are rubbish. This is an engagement of Facebook Messenger in the UK, and there's a few that get engagement, and the rest are basically not used and will die. Now, who provides solutions in that space is tens of thousands. Basically, anyone who's doing technical solution provisioning will provide access to chatbots because there's a lot of technology people can learn quickly. And what do they do, and how do they build it? I'll talk briefly about. Message number three, loneliness is a growth industry. Chatting helps. I'll explain more about what I mean about that in a sec. What kinds of chatbots are there? So, that's what I want to cover first. Well, there's really two kinds, broadly. The first, what we call task bots. Task bots are like ordinary software. They are designed for you to complete tasks. You do stuff, and you optimize as a designer for making it efficient and effective. What's really interesting is on the other side, the social bots. Now, so here we've got examples of Mitsuku, Shawai's, Rue, Jessie, Zoe, Rena, and another one I didn't include was Replica. Who has used any one of those bots? Put your hand up if you used one of those.
Steve spoke at the Meetup
on these things. Brilliant, great, okay.
On Mitsuku.
On Mitsuku, fantastic. So you've had direct exposure to Mitsuku as one example. What's really interesting about this whole space is it's a completely different objective. Now, those who have used it, the first time I tried using these, having used task bots or ordinary software, the really interesting thing is when you try using these bots, it's actually incredibly frustrating because you don't do anything, you just kind of chat. It's just you chat and you don't accomplish anything. The purpose of them is to build long-term empathy, trust, and companionship. They're really there to build that trust element in a very interesting way, and hence my message about loneliness is a growth area, because these are growing. And in China, Xiaoice, Microsoft China Xiaoice, 100 million users, 25% of whom have said I love you at some point to Xiaoice. So this is really interesting, right? Now imagine, Xiaoice is particularly interesting because it's been going some years. And the other thing that's fascinating about it is it also creates poems that then win competitions, it reads news, it's just insane. And that's why we have a Chinese speaker in our team, because knowing the global perspective is really valuable to understand what's going on really in the world. So this is pretty exciting, and what's really fascinating too is what happens when you get to intersecting here. So Reno is the Japanese version of Xiaoice, the Microsoft Reno. And so the real question here to ask at this point is, who better to ask about what to do or buy than someone you trust, right? This is trust at scale. I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. This is really interesting stuff. So let's assume that you want to build a chatbot for some reason. I assume you're here because there's some interest in that. And so what we've done is we've come up with a simple way of identifying key characteristics of a chatbot that are really different to how software was built in the past. And there are 3 characteristics. The way a system can handle ambiguity, the way a system can handle conversation, and the way a system can handle emotion. It's completely absent from normal software, and now is one of the things that a good chatbot can do. And so we measure the quality of chatbot on these parameters, and we'll have a specific example of this shortly. So that's the ACE factor, what we call it. So how do you build one? Well, this is our landscape. We tried to map it out. So it's not fair on you to say, hands up who hasn't used or has some technology that's not there, because it's far too small. Also, it's not fair because we actually have a catalogue of more than 600, and this is just a sample. But what we try to do, what I want you to come away from, is understanding the 3 main areas. The first is the fact that when you're designing bots, you have a bunch of different technologies. And these are very useful for prototyping quickly, to go rapidly to insight. These can be from simple static representations of a message. It could be an animation, it could be an interactive non-functional mock, or it could be a completely functional mock. I use Bot Studio, for instance, to connect, where is it? It's gone. Microsoft Lewis, to create a natural language interface to our search engine in 6 hours. It's really, really fast how you can prototype these things. So BotKit's really good for kind of prototyping things quickly, and there's a lot of other tools. So this design space is prototypes, rapid insight, experimentation. Then development, we've broken up from the top to bottom, ease of implementation through to ease of flexibility. So very flexible, very fast to implement. A lot of these systems are very specific use cases. So we've got Humanize, for instance, a London startup who's going to transform the hospitality industry with their ability to add chatbots as part of your hotel experience. So that's a very specific use case. As you go further and say, you know what, I need more flexibility, then I move to conversations and where you can use tools, often visual elements. And what's astonishing is how many tools there are. It's just unbelievable how many are in this space, doing lots of London startups. Yeah, Hutona's there, and Poly AI, and a few others across Europe as well. Pandora Bots, you've seen Action AI, there's lots of stacks, Hashblue, there's a lot. And it's evolving rapidly, and it's very exciting in that respect. Also overwhelming. Which one do you pick? Well, that's what we can help with a little bit, but also we have consulting partners who can help actually with those projects as well, who have specialty expertise in those tools. I was probably pulling my microphone too far away. Okay, so and then digging down, because there's really good reasons why you might want to dig further down, like understanding and parsing and patterns. I'm going to skim over those in this short point, but at each point there's really interesting open source things. So you've got RASA, open source conversations, you've got SNPs, understanding, you've got NLTK, syntax, and Spacey, and in fact they're all open source on that level. And then the enabler to all of this, and the big reason why this wasn't possible 6 years ago, is the fact that this stuff is so powerful. The machine learning part, the bit that allows you to create patterns, identify from examples, and create amazing things. So this is pretty exciting. And then the other one is optimization, a label we've given for 3 things: analytics, testing, and enrichment. So 3 things that basically improve the quality, because the key characteristic of bots is that you are committing, when you're building a bot, to operational improvement over time quite quickly. The first day that you launch your bot is probably going to be a bit rubbish, but it's going to get better, mostly because of these tools, who give you the insight into how to improve. That's the landscape. Full catalogue online soon. Stay tuned. That will be free, by the way. And it will be a catalogue of all the resources. So, I'm going to quickly whiz through some aspects. Which industries are affected? Well, you know the message. Chatbots are affecting every aspect of digital business communicates with people. We found these top 10 industries are affected the most at the moment, so that's interesting. We have a primer, we talk a little bit and give concrete examples of the business impact on those, and your subscription gives you drill into more detail again. But we go all over the world and we talk to people and we get the real stories of business impact, so it's very successful. Okay, slicing the other way, corporate functions. We found that these corporate functions are being affected the most, and a companion research offering in CognitionX is our impact of AI in HR, which covers all the ways that AI is affecting HR, not just chatbots. But marketing, sales, and customer services are big too. We've got a breakfast meetup coming soon, early October, where we're going to be showing some case studies of customer services impact, which will be really exciting. Again, focusing on the business impact. So we're focusing on what has really made the difference. Not, hey, this is exciting, but what's really making a difference, what's affecting the bottom line. So we are focusing on the business of natural language computing. Okay, so one case study summary, this is really exciting stuff for multiple reasons. Autodesk, that presented at CogX, who had seen that actually multiple times, Rachel, who's the director of machine automation at Autodesk, presented this. The really interesting thing is Autodesk customer support has, in a multi-year project, implemented a chatbot system that has 85 use cases, hundreds of thousands of customers processed a month. Their baseline customer satisfaction for the human team, which was 300 to 400 people, was 75%, human to human. Then they implemented Ava, the chatbot, just text, and they were able to meet that last year. Then they did an experiment, and then subsequently launched with Ava, a 3D avatar. And that boosted this customer satisfaction by another 10%. Now the reason why, if you think of the ACE index, is that the 3D avatar was giving them an emotional component two ways. With the camera, it can actually detect non-verbal gestures like, oh, you appear confused, would you like some help? So overall, what's really interesting about this is it's measurably improving by adding the emotional component and having this interactive element. What's particularly interesting and why I'm particularly proud is that Solar Sheets is a New Zealand company. They're the ones who created Lord of the Rings. Go Kiwis! So, future of chatbots. Well, what's the future look like? Chatbots have affected every point where digital business can be. That's kind of a pithy kind of thing, but really what we're talking about is three things. So we're expecting higher ACE factors. So that is the ability to deal with ambiguity, conversation and emotion is just going to get better. They're really good measures. It's a really good test, and it's really simple, and that's what we like it. One of the things that's quite interesting specifically is when you're having voice conversations. One of the things that really knocked the socks off most NLP engineers when they heard about the Google Duplex demo was the fact that it was the conversation overlapped like a normal conversation. When you're talking, there was interruptions and stuff going on, and the very best engineers in the world that I was talking to about this, they were like, "That is impressive." And that will be normal in a few years, as people expect this, and say, why is it not understanding me when it's talking, like a normal conversation? So there's a bunch of aspects around that we expect to just continue to improve, which is very exciting. Natural language everywhere. So I didn't say NLU before, but basically when it comes to understanding, now we have this technology that can take a sentence, a phrase, or an utterance, as it's called technically, and turn that into an intent, or what was intended to be said. Why don't we have that anywhere? Like, why don't we just have that in a dialogue box somewhere where you just want to ask a question? And this is starting to happen. We've got to see two examples of that. Google Analytics and Salesforce Einstein have this, where you can ask a natural language question. You go to Google Analytics right now, you can say, hey, what's the top trending page or whatever, and it'll understand it. So all this technology is going to be redeployed elsewhere. So when people say chatbots are dead, some parts of it might be, the bad parts will fall away, but the good parts, which is the ability to understand, and that's why our research program is natural language computing and not necessarily just chatbots. It's really about the fact that this is going to be useful and valuable at every point that businesses communicate with people. Mixed channel experiences. I see this period of time, it's almost like the world used voice to communicate, and then there was this kind of quiet era where people started using text, and as you saw, there was a lot of growth in that. But we're going to see a change, in my view, which is that we're going to start using voice more. And in a corporate environment, voice is not really appropriate in many situations, but we're going to see more of that. And so what we're going to see also is that we can't see things at the moment, and we've got Amazon Look and Amazon Show, and this is going to become much more common, that you have an experience where you use your voice to articulate things, because that's a pretty natural way. But another really natural way of interacting with systems is your eyes. Your eyes are way better to understand something than a stream of more than, in my case, 2 items. If Alexa gives me a result that has more than 2 things in it, I've forgotten the first one. I'd rather just have it on the screen, and this is going to be normal. So that's the future when it comes to mixed channel experiences. And social bots. Now this is the really interesting thing, the most provocative thing I think. If we think about what's happening with Microsoft Arena, Show Eyes, the Amazon Alexa Skills Challenge, which is about trying to get a conversation going for 20 minutes, I think, without the judges saying this isn't a person. And we look at Google Duplex. What are they all doing? Well, what they're all trying to do is create a single point that you trust that is a general chat experience. And it's unbelievably difficult and requires billions of data points to do that, and really those top players are really the only ones who are going to be able to do this well. So what's interesting here is that my kind of provocative statement is that they're all trying to get in front of each other to become the default way that you get access to all of your knowledge and services. And that's where you start taking over, and everyone's jostling for that. So I think that's a very interesting sort of thought, and what then we will do as providers is we'll plug into that ecosystem. So if you say in the future, maybe 12 months time, Alexa, order Thai for us tonight, it will know everything. It will know what Thai you mean, where you'll be, what us means, what tonight means, and actually have a small dialogue to confirm all that and then deliver that result. But that brings together a whole bunch of services. And the only people who are really going to be able to do that is the big players. So that's where they're all going. That's my view, by the way. No one else's. Pithy message recap. Okay, so the first one was chatbots are affecting every point where digital business communicates with people. That's the trend, right? The second pithy message is instant messaging is huge. It's not going away. Chatbots are part of that. Third pithy message, loneliness as a growth industry, chatting helps. And now you know the background as to that slightly oblique message. The fourth one, the new one, the summary of what I just said was, voice computing winner will be your default for all knowledge and services. And that's what they're all running for. And it's going to take a few years, but it's what they're all going for. Right, so stay tuned for our research launch, and that's the URL you want to get to if you want more information. Thanks all for your time. Any questions?
Yes. Does someone have questions?
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So social bots going to be the main OS, but people have different friends depending on who they are. Do you think that we'll see a differentiation between the social bots based on who you want to be friends with, or is one company going to be able to create a one-size-fits-all persona?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, the Microsoft Show Eyes is already customizing, and actually Replica does this too. This is already customizing its engagement based on how you interact. So it's already creating and molding itself as a mirror. So I think the first one's already showing that there's a mirror element to that, which is in fact, there's actually an entire forum where people post Replica screenshots. Replica is a system that really just basically does reflect a view of yourself, which is really funny. And some of them, they turn into basically sex bots. They're just this is a very dirty bot and I don't want to see this again. And others, it becomes quite empathic. So there's actually a really interesting element, which is rather than trying to create personas, which is sort of happening, there's an element too of this over time, the building persona. I have no idea how they do this. This is complete voodoo as far as I'm concerned. It's really interesting stuff.
Sorry, just to follow that. People crave authenticity, and if we're having a conversation and I start mimicking you in every way, then you're going to think I'm being insincere. Do you think there's a risk for the assistant, the same thing happening?
To repeat for the recording, if mimicking can be seen insincere, and is that potentially a concern? Well, I'm not a psychologist, but one of the fun things about my job is I do dip a wee bit into the worlds of neuroscience and linguistics and psychology, and I know almost nothing about it, but from what I've seen, empathy, part of empathy is mirroring as a technique. So you do get an element of the fact that because it kind of relates to what you're doing, that kind of works. And I think it just comes down to the level in which they actually do that that's going to work. I think it would be absolutely amazing to get someone from, say, Microsoft Research here to talk about that, Lily Cheng, for instance, to say, hey, look, this is what we're doing, and this is how we've done it. Her stuff is so cutting edge. You watch a talk from her from 2016, it's still really, really cutting edge stuff. Any other questions? 2 hands.
Hi. Here regarding the Big Four, those Big Four are horizontal companies.
Yeah.
And you're talking about a lot of vertical use cases. So do you think they get into the verticals by using transfer learning? Because each vertical will have the business context very different from the horizontal.
Okay, see if I can recap the question. So, yeah, the big players, we call them the mafia, so the Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, IBM, Alphabet, Google. So in terms of verticalization, there's 2 ways that this is already happening. First of all, they're all moving into verticals. So Google's Duplex is about restaurant ordering, specifically. Google has Jobs APIs. We have Alexa for hospitality launched last month, in June. We have them moving into these spaces. We also have on the lower level, machine learning space, we've got IBM, who has commercialized their data sets to make it really easy to understand a domain. The first one is travel. So basically they're all saying, let's provide this baseline, but the objective is for, the ultimate goal is for you to be able to be as effective understanding as possible. And the only way to do that is the vertical knowledge. And the challenge actually there is you have to, if you use their setups, and actually all of the understanding kits like Microsoft Lewis and Dialog, they have these packs, like predefined things. But you don't have a lot of visibility in a lot of cases about actually what they are or how to enhance them in easy ways. And this is actually a step actually I want to talk about in terms of the software engineers in the room. The big difference about working in this space is that when you're using a service, you're not just using functionality, you're using the data. And the data comes with it. And so sometimes you'll choose a system that you have to make a call to say, not only does it does these functions, but it also has really good quality and for the specific use case that we have, which can only be tested. So you have to try it out. You know, how accurate is it? How much additional work does it require for you in your operational environment to figure out how to actually get good quality experiences? And that's hard. And open source alternatives like Facebook's wit.ai, there's more access to those things, but it's quite a nuanced field now. And the key thing there is to take away that when you're using these services, it's not just the functionality, it's the data that comes with it that's part of that experience that you also have to evaluate.
Thank you. One more?
Hi, I'm Nicholas. Just a follow-up question to the previous one, really. I agree with everything you said, especially with the fact that the big four will take over, they will dominate the market. So, if, for example, Google or Amazon go, besides the vertical horizontal to everything, to just be the WeChat of the Western world, let's say, what is the role, if you see any, of the startups to actually develop technology that could either stay independent as the business grows or be acquired by them? So what's these blind spots that you may have seen that they may need?
That's interesting. I mean, if you look at them being competitors or acquisition, that's pretty much the only alternatives. So I think if I replay your question in another way, are there new opportunities that could actually stand well apart from them and actually stand by themselves and not be acquired, so you actually become a new force? Each of these areas in itself is its own industry and its own battle. I'll pick one because there's not much time and I want to respect the time of the other speakers. But there's one that's really most promising, I think it's worth you learning about, which is what happened with Baidu. They published a paper on a speech-to-text system called Deep Speech in 2014 with Adrian. So this was really interesting because it was basically a model for how you could do very, very high-quality speech-to-text. And then, last year, November, Mozilla, so that's the term, Mozilla is potentially one of the beacons, right? Built a TensorFlow version of Deep Speech. And I was evaluating it in the weekend, actually. And it's early days, but within 12 months, Deep Speech is going to be an incredibly compelling force. Those who are following Mycroft, which is an open source virtual assistant platform, they're just switching over to Deep Speech. They made that announcement a few months ago. It's really early days. I tried it on the weekend, and they've got some pretty serious bugs which are causing major issues in word error rates and things. But fundamentally, the exciting things are potentially in the open source space where they're religiously committed to being open, and I think Mozilla is potentially a good play. And I think if they play right, you could end up with the Linux of natural language computing, where you have an entire ecosystem that's open. And the other thing that Mozilla's doing that's really supportive of that is they've got the common speech initiative, where you can all do this right now. It only takes a few minutes. Go to common speech. I think it's the URL. I have to remember, where you can basically just read out words and use it as training data. So you have an open platform for training data. So any of the initiatives that are open like that have the momentum of a big player like Mozilla are really, really attractive. In terms of the independence, you have niche players. In the NLP space, you have big players like Nuance who are not going anywhere. They're not going to be acquired. They're a big company, 8,500 employees doing just natural language processing. So there's some big players in there that are doing good stuff. But the acquisition problem is also not just the big players, but the CRMs and the customer service are mopping them up. We had HubSpot just take on Motion.ai recently. So some of these guys, they're pulled. They're like disappearing to the horizontals, or they're disappearing to the verticals as well, like customer service, HR, and such like. So there's a lot of dynamics in there, but Mozilla is a shame space.
My question was coming in mind at the lower level. For example, you mentioned Amazon hospitality, right? Alexa for hospitality. Is there any point to doing hospitality Alexa scripts now? That they're going into the vertical themselves?
Is there any point? Oh, okay. Yeah. So I'll replay for the recording. I mentioned Alexa hospitality. Is there any point going to that space? Well, I know a couple of hospitality startups, and I actually got their opinion on it. Doing one thing well, and what a startup can do is they can know their customer incredibly well. Amazon's doing a billion different things, and they're trying a voice approach, and they're doing very specifically hotel experience, and there's a whole bunch of scenarios that just don't fit with their objectives. There is no reason why Alexa hospitality will work on a mobile phone anytime soon. So there's an entire journey that's just not been touched. So there's real hope there, I think.
Thank you very much, Julian. Everyone.